Medina not going to be here?
On the podium is the same as the one in the packet?
Okay. So we are set. Good evening. Welcome to the Charter Township of Van Buren Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, November 8th, 2023. At this time, I'm calling the meeting to order. Could we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, could I have a roll call, please?
Sherry Budd.
Here.
Here.
Peter Creel.
Here.
Medina Atchison is excused. Jackson Paul.
Here.
Jeff Jar.
Here.
Brian Kelly.
Here. Okay, we have an agenda before us. Do I have a motion for acceptance of the agenda?
Through the chair, I make a motion, we approve the agenda as presented.
We have a motion, we have a motion and a second for approval of the agenda. Do we have any additions or changes to the agenda? Discussion? All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we have also the minutes of the regular meeting of October 25th, 2023 before us. Do we have a motion on the minutes?
To approve the minutes?
We have a motion to approve and support, and a support of the motion for approval of the minutes. Do we have any changes or alterations to those minutes? Discussion? None. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, I don't see any correspondence, announcements, public hearing, or old business. We're moving on to new business. We have for us item number 1, case 19037, Hampton Manor Senior Housing Project Site Plan Amendment. We have a request by the applicant, Van Buren Investors Land Holding LLC, for an amendment to the site plan and architectural plans for a proposed senior housing facility called Hampton Manor with assisted living and memory care units. The property is located on the south side of Tyler Road between Morton Taylor and Haggerty Road in a Zone C local business district at 43345 Tyler Road, parcel ID number 83054990012-701. The parcel is 7.11 acres in size, and we have a presentation by staff. Director Power.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This site plan amendment has most recently been reviewed by the Planning Commission at their regular meeting on September 27th. And based on that meeting, the initial site plan amendment that was proposed at that time, the proposed material changes were denied, and there was an opportunity for the project to proceed according to the original approved plan, which is approved by the Planning Commission in final site plan format in June of 2021. The applicant has since proceeded with some of the work that is authorized under the original approved plans, including the installation of some dormers, some additional dormers, some modifications to the dormers that were constructed, and the removal of the blue siding that was not approved. But tonight before you, they have a request for some additional changes to the material composition of the project. I have an update just in terms of comments on the submittals that were provided, and I'll give a little bit more analysis at the end of this discussion. But there was a modification to the plans that were submitted last week in the packet. There's a new change in the plans that were forwarded today with some horizontal composite siding in place of vinyl siding. But otherwise, the changes are with respect to the color of the proposed brick, the quantity and color of the proposed cultured stone. And there are material samples that are shown in an image on the plans and available tonight on the table if the Planning Commission would like to ask the architect to show any of those. I know the architect is here as well as a representative from Hampton Manor. As I mentioned, I'll have a little bit of additional detail to provide at the end of the staff analysis, but I'd first like to hear from our planning consultant and senior principal planner from McKenna, Vidya Krishnan.
Thank you, Director Power. Just giving a brief background of the project, this proposal relates to the Hampton Manor Senior Housing Development that is located at the southeast corner of Morton Taylor Road and Tyler Road. The site is zoned C, which is local business district. The site did receive site plan and special land use approval for the senior housing in 2020. Subsequently, the applicant went through engineering and additional site design. They submitted their plans for building department approval, and the drawings that were submitted for building permits were consistent with the approved plans. However, once the site plan was executed in the field, numerous changes were made not just to the site, but to the entire architecture, all 4 facades of the building. The changes on the site were a significant departure that these were not something that administration can approve under administrative approval powers. So the applicant had to be brought back before the Planning Commission for consideration of amended site plan approval. Typically, if a change is going to be made on a site plan, the ordinance requires that such changes are approved by the Planning Commission prior to being made in the field. In this case, the changes were made, and then the applicant sought amended site plan approval from this body. They appeared before you on September 27th, 2023, with an as-built facade with certain modifications proposed to each of the facades, which the Planning Commission found to be unacceptable. The Planning Commission provided the applicant with feedback and told them to come back with a revised site plan that was true to the original intent of the approved site plan. Since then, the applicant's architect has been working diligently with Director Power to try and get the plans back where they were supposed to be. I'll summarize some of the changes in brief. With regard to the east facade, Director Power, is it possible to pull up my review letter so you can see the facades? Okay, yes. So the approved facade had a lot of masonry. It had dormers and other changes. The as-built facade on the east side, if you look at, yes, if you would scroll down, the middle picture is the as-built, the top is what was approved, and the bottom is now the correction that's being proposed. So the as-built actually went entirely to vinyl siding with no masonry whatsoever. All of the dormers were also eliminated. The Planning Commission did not find that acceptable. So at this time, the applicant is proposing to reinstall the brick with limestone sill foundation. The areas that were previously approved with brick at the 2 ends and in the middle that you see in darker shading on the screen are actually to be replaced with cultured stone veneer. The 4 previously approved barn-style roof dormers, which were omitted in the as-built, are going to be put back on the roof. The horizontal composite siding in the roof pitches and the walls were to be replaced with horizontal vinyl siding, but I believe there is an update on that, which Director Power will provide. The entrance door that is located in the middle in the as-built, you can see it's been minimized completely, but the correction proposed is, once again, it is going to be accented as an entrance as it was intended. With regard to the west facade, which is the next facade of the building, the changes were, as you can see, the as-built was not too much of a departure, although it was to some extent departing from the finished, from the approved elevations. But the corrections being proposed are reinstallation of the brick with limestone sill foundation, brick being replaced with cultured stone. The horizontal composite siding, I believe, is coming back rather than the horizontal vinyl siding that is shown as of the time of this letter being written. The 2 gable-style dormers are to be replaced back as 4 barn-style dormers, which were on the originally approved plans. With regard to the 3rd facade, which was the south facade, the as-built, once again, ended up eliminating significant amount of masonry on the building, eliminating all the roof dormers, and minimizing the accented portions, as a result of which, Director Power, if you could scroll to the next page with the south facade. As a result, it did not provide as much of an impression as it was intended. It just looks like the corner alone is accented by masonry and the rest of it is just a mass of horizontal siding. The corrections that are being proposed at this time are, once again, limestone sill foundation, brick areas to be replaced with cultured stone veneer, horizontal composite siding on the roof pitches and facades, I believe, will be reinstalled. The 3 approved barn-style roof dormers will be installed with metal roofs, and the 2 evenly spaced windows that have been replaced with a square window and door actually open up into a newly created courtyard area. I will discuss that further in my comments under fencing. And finally, the north facade, which is the primary facade that faces Tyler Road. This was the one facade that was reasonably close to what was approved, so the changes required were reasonably small. The applicant is going to replace the gable-style 2 roof dormers with the barn-style dormers that were on the original approved plan. And the cupola on the main feature, which they replaced with asphalt shingles, will go back to being metal, what it was on the approved proposal. Colors were one of the main points of discussion when the amended plan came before the Planning Commission. The approved original plan included all earth tone colors, and that was something specifically discussed at the Planning Commission because earth tone colors were in keeping with the residential nature of the neighborhood as a whole. While this is located in a residential area, it is a residential looking building with technically a commercial use. It is a commercial use. So the Planning Commission was very cognizant of the fact that the colors used on the building should not detract from the fact that it is located in an area where there are numerous single-family residential homes and subdivisions. The structure that was built with blue vinyl siding and numerous changes to the colors which were not acceptable to the Planning Commission. At this point of time, the applicant is replacing all of the materials with earth tone materials. One of the colors of the siding proposed, I believe, is still under question, and I will defer to Director Power to discuss that after my review. The cupola, as I mentioned, the main cupola feature over the building, which was built correctly but was provided with asphalt shingles. The asphalt shingles will be replaced with the metal roof to provide for an accent to the building as was originally intended. Finally, we come to fencing. The amended site plan, if you notice, includes a door on the north and south sides of the corridor that actually connect the assisted living facility to the memory care facility. So the doors open out onto 2 new fenced-in courtyard areas. One is on the north side of the building, and the other is on the south side of the building. And the north side courtyard is approximately 4,900 square feet, and the south side courtyard is about 3,400 square feet. The applicant proposes to enclose these 2 areas with a 6-foot-tall decorative painted aluminum fence. Now, our ordinance says that fences that are located within the front yard cannot exceed a height of 2.5 feet. That is a standard that's been applied to all projects. In this case, this fence is technically not in the front yard. The way our ordinance defines front yard is the yard that extends from the front wall of the building towards the street. This fence is technically placed behind that front wall. So while it looks like it's in the front yard, it is not in the front yard under the technical definition of the ordinance. We still continue to discourage the use of 6-foot-tall fences that are visible from the street. The south side courtyard is acceptable because it's facing the rear of the property and is acceptable for a 6-foot fence. On the north side, we would recommend that the applicant consider maybe a 2.5-foot-tall decorative fence, and if the intent is to provide for a protective screen so that people who are in the memory care or assisted care facility do not leave the facility, it can be accomplished through evergreens planted to make an impenetrable hedge so that you maintain the safety of the individuals who will actually be using the courtyard. The other concern we have with respect to the courtyard is these are basically 2 utilitarian spaces between the assisted and the memory care facility. This is where the air conditioning units are. While we encourage the use of the space to provide more recreation amenity to the patients or the seniors who live in this facility, more attention needs to be paid to make it into a true amenity, not merely a fenced-in utility area where seniors are cordoned off. So our recommendation is if you want to provide it as an amenity, it needs to be designed as an amenity. Put a bench, some landscaping, make it attractive so that the people in these facilities who cannot leave the facility for their own safety will actually have a nice place to have open space and open air, enjoy the outdoors. So our recommendation is the south side fence can be maintained at 6 feet, the north side fence be dropped to 2.5 feet with possibly an evergreen hedge to provide security, and both these spaces be designed to be more of an amenity, not merely a fenced-in area for the seniors to be in. So the applicant has made significant progress since they came back before you and got your feedback on the previous as-built plans being unacceptable. So the applicant has been working with Director Power, and I know because I have seen more emails than I care to recollect with the architect making a good effort to keep changing the plans till it's brought to a point that would be acceptable to the Planning Commission. I think it's come a long way, but I think some more progress has been made just in the last day or two, which I'm not yet up to speed with. So I will defer to Director Power to actually summarize what changes have been made in the last copy that is before you with regard to the vinyl versus composite siding and some other architectural details. I would be happy to answer any questions that the Planning Commission might have.
Director Power?
Thank you, Ms. Krishnan. Thank you, Planning Commission. I will try to pull up a version of the approved landscaping plan for the project to try to illustrate one of the points that Ms. Krishnan made. But while I do that, I will refer to my report that was revised, dated November 7th. I'd like to summarize a few things, and then I'll get into those landscaping comments when there's a chance to do so a little bit later. As part of the evolving request that has been submitted and the work that's being done by the applicant, there have been a number of questions that have been posed and clarifications that I'd like to make based on some of the questions our planning commissioners have previously asked of staff. The first is where the standards come from broadly for the architectural requirements in senior housing projects and for this project in particular. And just to provide some clarity on that and to kind of resurface that, Section 5.143 of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance provides the overall special land use requirements for senior housing projects. And specifically, Section 5.143I, subsection 1, provides the material requirement standards for senior housing, and that is included now in the report that I've provided. I also wanted to make a couple of clarifications regarding the siding on the front of the building. There were questions posed regarding the use of horizontal siding and whether that was proposed as vinyl or horizontal composite. And the reason that that was a question is that in the original approved site plan, which was based on an architectural elevation sheets that were the basis for the original preliminary and final site plan approval dated February 3 of 2020. There were notes that clearly stated that the siding would be horizontal composite. There was also an exterior finishes schedule on the sheet that did not refer to that being horizontal composite, but noted two different types of vinyl siding. However, in the reports from staff and in the comments from the Planning Commission, it was clear in the labels on those exterior elevations, the original called out material was the horizontal composite. So there was some ambiguity there, but it was clearly the intent of the approval to be horizontal composite. That is important because of the next point I will make, which is something that I belatedly added into the reporting for tonight's meeting, which is that under section 5.143I, subsection 1F of the zoning ordinance, vinyl siding in senior housing projects in particular is only permitted to be used as an accent material. Specifically, vinyl siding and non-durable building materials are accepted as accent materials, but shall not be used on more than 10% of any exterior building facade's wall area. And so the applicant was requested to submit exterior finishes schedule with a material percentage breakdown. And knowing and seeing that the finishes that were previously proposed had a lot of vinyl, we recognize that the vinyl was likely in excess of the 10% requirement under the zoning ordinance. And so we requested that the applicant be responsive in submitting an alternate to that material that would be approvable. So the applicant has submitted was requested to submit a revised four-sided color elevation and a revised exterior elevation sheet in PDF format. These submittals were provided this morning. One clarification, the applicant's architect who is here tonight clarified that the exterior elevation color renderings would be proposed as the same. Essentially, the horizontal composite would take on the color of the previous vinyl siding that was proposed. But now there are exterior elevations with the primarily uncolored sheets with the finishes at the bottom of the page that are in front of you tonight that were provided. There's also a material percentage breakdown that's provided on that sheet that I will summarize. On the east facade, 20% of the material is brick, 24% stone, 37% horizontal composite siding, and roughly 6% vinyl shake in the upper levels, and doors and windows, 11.3%. On the west facade, you're looking at roughly 21% brick, 32% stone, 25% horizontal siding, 14.4% doors and windows. And then on the, south elevation, there's 27% brick, 29% cultured stone, 32% horizontal siding, 4% vinyl shake, 13% doors and windows. And on the north elevation, you're looking at 17% brick, 39% cultured stone, 20% horizontal siding, 8% vinyl shake, and 15% doors and windows as proposed and presented tonight. Before you, you have sample building materials of all those materials except for the horizontal composite siding, which was, of course, introduced with these late requests. So there's not a material sample of that tonight, to my awareness, and the architect is here. He can clarify what's planned for that a little bit more. So that would open this project up to further discussion and consideration. Some conditions that I write into my report are just that we will need 2 signed sealed versions of any amended sets of civil plans and 2 signed sealed sets of any amended building plans that will be filed with the Van Buren Township Department of Planning and Economic Development, and approved exterior elevations, which are the final versions that are approved, must align with the relevant architectural plan set sheets, which include the roof plan sheet, which is sheet A9 in the overall building permit submittal, the wall sections, sheet A10, and any others that would be affected by these material changes that are proposed. So just wanted to document those final formats of the plans that we'll need on file in our office for purposes of inspection and record keeping. I did want to just kind of zoom in on an area to illustrate one of the comments in the planner's reporting, which is relative to those courtyard areas. So bear with me, I will, those plan sheets in the original issued for construction set, and right one. Here we go. So let me put the screen back on and illustrate this one. I think it's trying, maybe. because it's having issues. I guess I will just take this as an opportunity to say that as the, oh, there we go. As the planning consultant said, there needs to be attention paid to the way that those spaces are programmed, the accessibility of those spaces. There is some landscaping in the original approved landscaping plan that if there is a way to get out into those areas and have an accessible walking surface, perhaps some paving to be able to enjoy those courtyard spaces. There are some proposed honey locust trees and I believe dogwood or smaller shrubs that may need to move in the final version of the landscaping plan. So we just don't want to lose sight of that. If I can pull it up quickly, I'll show you, but otherwise we can revisit that point in the meeting. Not sure if this will work. So I don't want to take any more time on the comments, but that's just a point that I wanted to help illustrate and reiterate. So I'm happy to answer any other questions. You do have the proposed, the most recent proposed exterior elevations before you tonight, and some conditions that the planning consultant and I have recommended if you are considering any kind of a conditional approval. Of course, the opportunity is open for, again, denying, having discussion and postponing, or approving with conditions. So I'll leave that up to the Planning Commission. We have Mr. Sam Martin and John Costa, the architect, with us tonight to help explain the project as well.
Okay, thank you. And now for the applicant, you have some comments for us, please.
John, can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I didn't know how close I had to get to that. My name is John Costa, the architect for the project. And I wasn't involved or attending your original approvals during the Planning Commission process and all of that. But I have been brought up to speed. I understand what's happened since then, what happened at the meeting last time. And somewhere along the way, the management team and the contractor deviated quite a bit from what was intended, and trying to help them make those corrections. I was involved with the construction documents and all of that. So you know, I did prepare those, so I am aware of all of that. As far as what was resubmitted, you know, we're trying to get back to the original intent of the design and the approved drawings. And there has been, I drove by the site just before I came here. There's been work that's been started trying to get it back to its original intent. The dormers have already been, the existing dormers that were put on were revised, and the additional dormers that were indicated have already been put on. That was in keeping with the original design and the original approved drawings. The cultured stone around the base of the perimeter has been removed in preparation to be replaced with brick, as originally intended. The vinyl siding that went up is all gone. That's been removed. And as Mr. Power explained, I think it was Monday afternoon when the realization came that we're not going to be able to use the horizontal vinyl siding as proposed. And that's where some quick revisions were made. I had originally brought the samples last Thursday, so that came with what we were hoping to use for the vinyl siding. But this came to light Monday afternoon. We revised the drawings to get rid of the horizontal vinyl siding notation and changed that notation and provided an alternate material and color for that spot. What our intent was today was to at least, were the brick that was previously identified, we're proposing a slight change in that, so I brought that sample and that's what's indicated in the drawings. And the same thing with the cultured stone. There was an original approved on the drawings manufacturer and color, And we would like to propose a change to that. So that's part of that. As far as the courtyard patios, Dan, I don't know if you have, because within those patios, we're talking about this section right here on both sides. There's, the assisted living is everything to the right.
Mr. Costa, could you speak up, please? We have some people
Okay.
having trouble.
Sorry. So the courtyard separates the assisted living portion of the facility from the memory care portion. And all of the units, the assisted living units that face that particular courtyard have their own individual sliding door and patio, so they can go out into that space. It's not just green space. There are currently no other pathways or public amenities such as the other 4 courtyards that exist. And that's being worked on, I believe, with the civil engineer.
Okay.
So that's the area in question. So there are individual patios currently planned for the assisted living units that open onto those.
Okay, I believe the concern was when we asked for an updated site plan, the site plan that came did not identify those individual
Okay.
patios for each of the units. It looked merely like a area where you would have only air-conditioned units. So we'd just like to make sure that the updated site plan, the final version that is going to be in our files, actually shows all those patios, shows those trees and this landscaping, and it being designed as was intended as an amenity.
Understood.
Not merely a space where you contain
Right.
people.
That was the intent. I'm not sure why that particular page made it back without the other stuff.
Nothing on it, so
oh,
that's why
okay.
I got a little
Okay.
concerned.
I'll make sure that is addressed. As far as I think that's it. So, it's the, I will, as soon as I have a actual sample of the horizontal siding, I'll submit that. I understand you probably won't want to approve that without seeing it. But what we would like is some sort of feedback or approval or denial on the brick and the cultured stone so that those items could proceed.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one question for Mr. Costa. Would you please address for the planning commissioner the fence in the front, the north courtyard, the fact that it is 6 foot tall? Our recommendation still stands. You might technically meet the requirement of the ordinance, but it goes against everything the planning commission has approved in a C, C1, C2, C3 district. So if it can be lowered and landscaping used to contain the area, that's what we would recommend.
I understand that. It's not a solid fence. It's aluminum picket of some sort. So you can see through it. It is for security purposes of, even though it's assisted living, that's part of an assisted living courtyard, just for safety and security and potentially, they're oftentimes within the range of, they're typically elderly, and you can attest to that.
Could you introduce yourself as well, sir, please?
I'm so sorry. My name is Sam Martin. The reason why we use, it's more or less, we get with pool companies. It's aluminum black fence, and it's for safety of the residents that are living in those apartments. I'm going to point out, but I guess it's not up anymore. But basically what it is when the residents are out there on their patio, they just feel more secure knowing there's a fence there, so they feel like they're protected. That's why we do interior courtyards on the assisted living side as well, because they can go outside, have their cat walk around or whatever the case may be. Same way on the other courtyards too, we use fences because we are pet friendly. And, oh, perfect. Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. So let's see here. So yes, so right here, those are the actual patio areas that the residents actually will have their patio chairs, so on and so forth. And because we're pet friendly, we usually put up some type of gate there as well too, or not a gate, but a fence to keep them protected. Fire marshal wants them to have like a pool gate with that plunger, just in case fire erupts, they can easily exit. But that's usually what we do and why we have a fence opposed to just landscaping, to help keep the residents feeling protected and to kind of keep their animals in there if they decide to have a cat or a dog.
Okay. Do we have any questions, comments? Commissioner Paul? Excuse me.
Would you be, if you have to have a fence, would you be interested in or willing to move it down to the 2.5-foot recommendation or suggestion?
I guess it wouldn't really serve its purpose at that point, but we could do both. We could screen it from the street with landscaping, as she was suggesting, and just have the fence behind it so it's not as visible from the road, if that's an acceptable option.
I'd tend to agree with that. I think that if you could not at least take a
Right.
portion of the aesthetic height away from it by planting in front of it, as long as it's more of an evergreen type planting, something that lasts all year
Yes,
long.
yes, I'm not opposed to a security fence considering the nature of the facility and the fact that it's pet friendly, which is the first time I'm hearing, but if that's the intent, if landscaping could be put in front of it, evergreen, so that we don't necessarily have to see that fence, except maybe through the gaps is fine, but as long as it's screened, it's fine. The concern is not as much on the south side. So I do not have an issue if that's what they plan to do.
Okay. We'll make sure that happens.
Mr. Chairman, I'd need to see that fencing in an elevation diagram. I'd need to see that on a final site plan. When we have a site plan that has fencing, we typically get to see a material sample for this fence, you know, a part number for it to make sure that it's a compliant piece of fencing. I think we also need to see quite a bit more detail around the courtyard, you know, that you've proposed to add. Since this is an addition, it's not on the original approved plan. I think it was not clear to me that those were intended to be porches and not air conditioning pads. So a detail would be good on those. I noticed that the other courtyards are very well detailed with the paving and assuring that the residents are able to go in and out of their doors and are able to walk on pavement. These additional ones need that same level of planning and detail, including landscape planning. Since we're talking about a fence with potentially screening, I don't think that's an unreasonable request.
Understood. You know, I'll make sure that all this information makes it to the civil engineer.
The chair, I guess I would request, I would like you to look at that hazelnut color that you have on the vinyl siding, if that's what you're going to put on the other siding coming in. That originally, with the original brick, because there was so much brown, it matched. But now with you putting that sandstone, which is more white with a lot of black, it's my personal opinion, that does not look appealing. And I'd like you to look at that again.
So the hazelnut was the actual vinyl color. I don't believe that exact color will be what's available for the
And I guess I'd like
other.
to.
So we're gonna bring the sample of the actual
That just doesn't.
new
That doesn't
horizontal.
blend with your new colors, I
Okay.
don't think.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think that in the original as-approved document, you had a lot more red brick going up the walls, and now it's being replaced with this lighter cultured stone. So I think even though that earth tone siding may have been, you know, the material choice in the first as-approved plan, now that you're looking to do cultured stone instead of the brick, it's not as contrasting. It doesn't provide maybe the same level of breakup. Is that what the
Right.
commissioner's trying to? Yeah, it doesn't provide maybe the same level of breakup that would be expected there. I hope I summarized that correctly. Mr. Chairman, I have a question about this west elevation diagram, this color rendering. I see on this facade, I'm gonna hold it up so that the applicant can see it. There's an area here that is a roof, looks like a roof peak, and it looks like a couple of walls over here.
So so the west facade is towards the road, right?
The
So-
road, towards one of the
Yeah,
roads.
so, well, the main facade, the north facade is Tyler Road. So this is on, the west facade is the other road. I forget, Morton Taylor or something.
Morton Taylor.
And so what you're seeing, the area just outlined is the entrance, the covered entrance that's, 3/4 of the way back on the building from that point.
Do I have any diagram anywhere that tells me what the material is going to be on those walls? I mean, I'm looking at quadrilateral, what do they call
Well-
it, isometric views? I can't see what the material choice
So,
is.
so the other drawings, the actual elevations
Yeah.
with the views, there should be one of those that actually indicates consistent with what's around it.
Mr. Grant, could you hold that up to the applicant, please? For the architect, I'm sorry, sir. Didn't mean any disrespect.
Commissioner Jar, I believe what the applicant is saying is if you look at the north facade, you can see the main entrance. I believe
not delineated,
he's
so-
indicating that the same brick and stone wraps around to the side, although it's not clear.
The lower band, 2 feet of brick is throughout, and then at that front entry of the porch.
He's saying it extends around.
This is called cultured stone, that extends around the sides.
Great. In the updated plan, it needs to be shown. You can't leave a wall just blank in an updated plan. This is a contract. This is the document that determines what you get to build. And it needs to be accounted for in the percentages. I see a pretty big, triangular roof piece. Did you count when you're trying to do the materials percentages on the facade?
Everything on the facade is accounted for.
Okay, it's just not documented. Okay. So in the revision, I'd like to see exactly what those materials are intended to be. I'm done with that.
Chair, I have a couple questions as well. And it actually goes to these drawings as well. So I would assume that once he makes those additions of those materials, that this drawing is representative of what should be built in the field if approved, correct? The one thing that I noticed that's a carryover from the original is that the column bases at the entry themselves are different than what's in the field. The ones in the field are shorter, squatter, as far as column bases, and the columns are tall, thin, and straight, and these are actually tapered. All of these columns are tapered. What's in the field is not. So I'm kind of a little curious on how that's going to be handled. Also, I noticed what's not in the field, which you do show here, which I'm assuming that everything here is getting corrected, is that some of the metal roofing that you're going to be putting into place on some of these facades, that construction of support, that's just not in place yet. So I just wanted to bring that to light, as well as the shed dormers that you do have out in the field now aren't in the same position, at least from what I can see on the west facade, is what's in this drawing. So
As far
some,
as the actual
yeah,
placement.
yeah, I'm not sure, I don't really think I have any comment about location so much as whatever you turn in gets approved needs to be built that way.
I understand
Or
that,
we-
but
or
but I
what's
only
that-
have so much, I don't have any control over that. But I understand what you're
Well, I
saying.
think what you would have to do, if you're in agreement to where it's placed versus what's on here, assuming that we are as well, that the drawing would have to get modified similar, to these other items, so that it matches exactly what's gonna get built. And right now, I don't think it does. Not 100% anyway. I mean, it's close.
Commissioner, you're referring to the dormers that have been added back onto the building recently aren't in the
On the
same
west side.
position as these proposed diagrams,
At least on the west side.
at least on the west.
Yeah, and I don't have any concern about what's been built, just that it needs to match what's, the drawing needs to match that.
I'm not aware of that.
You might want to, I would just go around and
So,
check, because there's a lot going on, and, my concern would be, once you get this approved, if someone goes out and inspects it and it's not in the right place, they basically can ask you to change it. Other than that, I'm not familiar with the original color renditions because I wasn't here for that, so I'm gonna kind of leave that up to you at this point.
I have a question concerning the fences. Is there a reason for, let's say, on the be on the north side for them to be 6 feet? Is there a reason you use 6 feet versus maybe 4 feet?
For resident safety. It makes them feel warm and fuzzy inside that they see a nice fence and they feel protected.
Well, I was going to say, rather than why 6 feet, 4 feet, would that work? Or to kind of reduce the site as well as being, and also would there be a gate on that fencing? So if some emergency occurred, somebody could access that?
Yeah, like I previously mentioned, it's like a pool fence. It has a plunger open gate, so it's a plunger. I don't know if you're familiar with a pool gate at all, but that's basically how they work. It's kind of like it's a magnetic plunger that opens and closes these gates, and there's an opportunity to lock it too. But the fire marshal
Okay.
wants to keep that open in case there is a fire. And I never had a township request a 4-foot fence, but the reason I came up with that is because I always talk to all my residents, and I kind of get what they like and what they don't like, because that's the whole premise of what we're trying to do is make them feel protected, and that's what they like.
Yeah,
They-
like a
they
6,
just like
okay.
that.
It was just a question as to why, 4 foot would still offer the security, be difficult for one of your clients to, or residents to
Hop over. Yeah.
hop over.
It's not so much our residents getting out, they feel protected that no one's getting into their area, is what they're comforting of. But I agree with you, we don't want that to happen either. But the premise of our residents is they're scared someone might jump over
Over
that.
the fence.
But again, you're right, we don't want them doing the opposite either, so.
I know the memory care, and I know what can happen with that type of individual, and
Yes.
so, that's fine. I just, was a question, yes.
Mr. Chairman, would it be appropriate to request from staff and the applicant that we get a sign-off from the fire marshal on the next set of updated plans for whatever the gate is?
Absolutely.
We really want our fire marshal to weigh in on that. When you have a gate that can be locked,
Of course, yeah,
Great, thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you. Director Power?
Oh, you have a question.
Just a comment, Commissioner Cullen. The hazelnut color is no longer compatible with the new colors you're proposing. The original colors on this building were a deeper shade of red. As such, the brown contrasted with it. Right now, with the lighter color brick, the hazelnut is looking more like yellowish in tinge. So would the Planning Commission be amenable? I mean, I don't want the applicant to come back with a composite siding color, which we are like, okay, this looks even worse than the hazelnut. So maybe it should be more of a darker brown, because now your brick is lighter. There has to be a contrast. You can't have light material against light. If you have lightened the brick, maybe because your cultured stone is that color, you need to have some amount of contrast. Maybe you go for a darker earth tone brown, deeper wood brown, not something that's got an yellowish tinge brown. Either that, or some of that cultured stone has got grays in it. Would the Planning Commission consider shades of gray? Because gray does give a more modern appearance to the building. It's used a lot in residential construction, but if that's not something the Planning Commission wants to see in this area, we might as well tell the applicant not to come back with a shade of gray.
Through the chair. I would agree. I think I mean, I don't know what the original color palette was. I don't have it. But I would agree that they should complement one another.
Yeah.
And in this case, you've got darks and lights. I mean, big fields of lights.
Yeah.
I'd be concerned it wouldn't read as a complete facade. It'd read as pieces or parts that like somebody just put up what they had at hand. I do have a question too. Am I correct, is there 2 types of cultured stone?
No, there's only, well, the one is the original that was the approved one, and the
One?
the
The larger-
darker, the one on the board.
Yeah, the one that looks more like stone. Right, the other is a smaller sort of ashlar pattern. And the other one looks more like, I want to say river rock, right?
Well, yeah, definitely different sizes, yeah.
And so,
Different
can
colors.
may I ask the reason why you went from that to the lighter one?
Well, the changes were made in the field at some point.
Okay,
I don't know what drove those. But the culture stone that's up is what we'd like to keep.
Yeah, it seems like that's driving the new color palette now, right? Would I be safe to say that?
Yes, because the stone that you are proposing to use now and that you have already used is the lighter colored stone, and now your brick is also lighter. So the siding needs to pick up the contrast and be slightly darker, so it doesn't look like a uniformly washed out looking building. So the contrast needs to be there between. So I would suggest that when you pick your composite siding, you pick complementary colors and do show it to us before you come to the planning commission with one choice, which might not,
What I'll do is I'll bring 2 or 3
yes.
samples that we can pick from.
Yes. I think that would be reasonable because that color will not work.
It seems to me like the placement and the percentages seem to meet what, at least seems to meet the standards that we're looking for. Maybe it's just, at this point, it's just the palette.
Correct.
But
Correct.
the only comment I would say, is what would be your intent with regard to these columns being different? I mean, especially the one at the main entry, they're really tall and spindly compared to what you show in this elevation. I mean, this is much nicer looking, what you originally drew.
To the planning commission, those kind of design decisions, if where that falls in the big picture of, is it something that needs to be corrected, or can it stay with the square versus tapered?
I'll give my opinion, I'll let Director Powers address that. But I would assume that whatever you present as a drawing for final design approval, that you have to match it. That's all I know.
If I may, sir? I think what the commissioner is saying is that if you've already got those columns up out in the field and you intend to keep them up, they need to be reflected in the drawing.
Right.
And, we'll consider the whole thing overall as an entire package with its palettes and its architectural features, and be able to give you hopefully an approval so that you can get moving and get on with the business at hand.
I would say, unless you like your design better than what they built.
That's typically the case, but again, I don't have that kind of control over this.
No,
So,
that's a contract, right?
back to a couple of issues as far as the brick modification and the cultured stone modification. We're looking to see if those are 2 items that we can proceed with and the material ordered, and for those 2 specific items anyways. I understand we have to come back with the landscaping and the fence, and then with the siding samples.
Which 2 did you say?
The brick and the cultured stone.
That's my understanding, brick is.
I thought the crusted stone was already
Right,
out there.
Star's asking is, can they proceed with this choice of brick and cultured stone while they finalize the siding?
Correct.
So would you please hold up the brick and the stone sidewise? It's better to get a perspective.
Speaking of the brick, is this a full width brick? See, now, that might be something, I mean, I don't know if it was originally presented as thin brick. Basically, it's gonna, I don't know how to put it for anybody, it's gonna be cemented to the side. It's not a full width brick, which means a full width brick, typically you have to have a brick sill as part of the foundation design, which my understanding originally it was, and it was left out when the foundations were built. Right? So at this point in time, you're not getting real brick, full thick brick. You're getting brick that basically maybe a little thicker than that, which is cemented to the side of the building. I mean, based on what, right, but the performance of it is nothing near what a full-size brick being stacked up and mortared together would be. So there's both potentially, I'm just gonna let everybody know, potential over time. When if water gets behind it or migrates into it, they will be popping off, and I've seen it happen before plenty of times. Yes, it could happen with cultured stone as well. Was it originally intended to be a full thickness of brick?
Yes.
The cultured stone sample, I'd like to see the current one. So the issue with the hue is that the cultured stone that's being proposed is very light in color, right? This is the proposed change. Would you like to see a piece of colored stone?
That has already been installed.
Yes.
That's already there.
Here's your proposal. I think, Mr. Chairman, I think the question was whether or not they could proceed with the materials, if we could approve piecemeal some of the materials, but not the entire thing as an entire palette. I have reservations about doing that. I think the brick that is on the table and that is proposed is good, and I think that I hope you'll be able to find siding that matches with the brick. But if we approve that brick as a single approved material, I'm concerned that may cause you more problems in case the rest of the palette doesn't come together. Is that a legitimate concern
I
from
agree
an
with that, yes.
architectural
I think
standpoint?
it should be presented as a complete palette together so that, and he's right, you could put yourself into a position where you have to accept something that just doesn't quite complement one another. I mean, I think you've got everything in the right place. I think you're there, but I just think it's a matter of, making sure the palette all is cohesive and it complements one another.
So I just want to kind of make sure I understand. So we like the brick that's proposed, correct?
I wouldn't say, I know that I would say we like the brick. I would say that you need to make sure the brick, the stone, and the siding complement one another.
So alls we're asking to do, we just want to keep moving this forward.
Right.
Like I said, we have several residents that are trying to move into the building. We just are trying to keep the guys working while they're there. Because you know how masonaries are. Once they leave a job, they leave the job and it's hard to get them back. So we're just trying to keep the ball moving forward. So what we'd like to propose is let's approve this so we can kind of keep everything moving down the road. And then we can bring in several samples with these back as well too. And then we can let you choose of what is available and what you choose or feel goes with that. Does that make sense?
I think that's the same thing you said before.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the reservation was that we're not
Sandstone
seeing
is
it
all
all as a
on already.
cohesive design.
You will see it all together too.
It's all on already.
We approved this brick. Otherwise, if we get the sample, then we're redoing everything again.
Do you have areas that need the cultured stone still to be applied?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Or the brick anyway.
The culture stone that is up is up.
Yeah.
It does still need to be applied in some other areas though, because work was stopped along south and east face. So I believe there are areas where that can still go up. Primary, the mason is getting things on order and coming if they're gonna be that acceptable, is an acceptable change or not. I'm confident we can find a color of siding that will
So,
making
a recommendation one way or the other. But just in planning, sometimes we have come across situations where a developer wants to proceed with the project and they want to start gutting a building on the interior or doing some demo work. We do allow them to proceed provided they assume full risk of what they are doing. Planning Commission telling them that brick and that stone is okay is no guarantee they're going to be pleased with the composite siding color. So if the Planning Commission says, we like those two, but we are not sure if the siding that you're going to propose is going to match it, the applicant will have to keep working on bringing back a siding till you're okay with it as a palette as a whole. That is a risk you assume, and the Planning Commission is trying to protect you from you putting yourself in a position where you're going to have to find that siding that they find acceptable as a whole picture.
Understood.
So how long do you think it's going to take you to find a siding to bring back to the Planning Commission?
Well, we'll be at your next meeting. That's the intent.
Is 2 weeks worth you taking that risk?
Pardon me,
From a material standpoint, the
4 weeks.
4 weeks?
Oh, it's 4 weeks.
Yeah.
There is
We
no
only have
meeting
one meeting in
on
November.
Wednesday, the 22nd.
Oh,
December.
hopefully one meeting in
So
November.
your
or
next
December.
meeting will have, yeah,
Oh,
A quick question. You know, and I'll start with a statement. Even if we approve the cultured stone as a materials choice, you can only use it in places where cultured stone was called out in the originally approved plan, because at that point it'll just be material substitution. It won't be an architectural change. It won't be a site plan change. The brick banding that you're asking us to approve the material change for on the brick banding, is that brick band being built in exactly the same way as it appears in the approved and valid site plan?
The bottom?
Because I ask, because even if we approve you the brick today, you're not,
Not for
I
this,
don't,
yeah.
I don't see us approving the entire package today, which
no,
means
I
you
understand
can't
that.
put
I
it, you
understand
can't
that.
put
There's
it
a
up.
couple of outstanding issues, I understand that. But as far as we had a 2-foot perimeter, or 2-foot band around the entire perimeter, and that, other than maybe at the very front entrance, but everywhere else, that's what we're showing.
The brick banding on what they're proposing appears to be consistent with the banding that was on the original approved drawing. So, not the brick on the sides where cultured stone is being shown, but the banding is consistent.
I guess I would pose a question to this discussion here is, are you comfortable with the stone and the brick colors? Or actually, the stone, you kind of have to accept that, right? At this point in time, but it's the brick, you know, adjacent to the stone. Are you good with that? Because in practice, I wouldn't come to a planning commission with parts and pieces to get it approved. I wouldn't do it that way. Because when I choose materials on a building, I choose them all at one, you know, choose them as a group. I wouldn't say, hey, I can find one that'll match. I just don't think it's good practice. But I think that they could, if you're willing to accept the brick color, because we'd have to accept the stone at this point in time, that I believe that they could find a complementary siding. But they would have to work at it. If they brought one that you didn't like, they'd have to keep coming back till they did. But so to my mindset right now is this commission willing to accept the color of the brick so that they can start?
The brick is not inconsistent with what we see on single-family homes in that
Yeah.
area. It is, I mean, if you even compare it with the original one and this, it's a little off, but it's consistent with the colors of brick we approve on single-family residential homes.
So that would be my only question. The only comment I would make in general is that I'm not happy with the fact that they didn't put in the brick sill and put in full white brick, because I think that's a lesser standard of construction of what they're presenting. But at this point in time, what they've not done is accommodated the foundation to pick that up. And to me, that was started from the very beginning. That was a decision made early on, and you probably, not at your request.
I'm really of the opinion that it all ought to be one package and it should be approved all at one time. Let's get all the details right, get it set in
Through the-
plans, in
yeah,
writing.
Through the
and
chair,
approve it.
in respect, I have feeling and understanding that you want to get the project moving. I think if they come back with multiple samples, and if it's something that this commission needs to help make a choice of which is going to be more appealing, I mean, I think there's been some last-minute changes, right? The vinyl out of these plans as of pretty much today or yesterday. So, in my opinion, I think if we could, I don't know, if as a commission have some flexibility and approve the brick so they can move that and don't lose the labor, from what I'm understanding. I mean, that would be my choice, not to hold it back a little bit, but also that the applicant has the understanding that agreed with staff that, you know, you assume the risk that if you can't find a match, some things are gonna have to be changed, right? To make it more appealing. So multiple samples coming back for that vinyl or the siding would help.
Well, I still
My
think it
opinion.
comes back to to answer the question, does everyone on the commission, or at least a majority, accept the brick color? Because that's what it comes down to. I mean, if we're saying we need to see all those samples at one time, because that's the way it should be done, then basically, they're gonna bring back the same brick. And the siding is the stone's the stone, the synthetic stone. So it really just comes down to the hardy board is what you're looking at using, that color rendition. Now, if there's reservations for the brick tone compared to the stone, compared to the siding, then then I would, if everybody feels they're not sure that that's the right brick, then I would agree with you. They should just come back at one time, come back again.
Through the chair. I don't think, at least personally, I don't think my problem is, the brick. The brick itself is the brick. It's how does the brick look with the rest of the materials? And again, don't want to slow you down. We're sympathetic. Getting labor right now is tough. We get that. But again, I don't want this to turn into this is what, probably your third meeting. If you go all the way back to the initial one, turn it into a fourth in December, then, what if you come back with 2 or 3, it's still not approved, then we're looking at January. So again, I don't, the brick looks like brick to me. But when you put it with other materials, I think that's when you see the change. So again, I side with my colleagues that I'd like to see a full slate of presentation, like a full slate of materials.
Are those the same brick?
No.
No, these are labeled.
The one on the right looks different.
Right, the approved one?
That's the one on the right.
In the
I like,
original?
yeah. It has less red in it.
Yeah.
It's more earth tone on the right, slightly. I mean, it is off a little bit. You can tell it's less intense red. It has less red in it.
There's a deposit on the sample.
See, no, that's where you open up the brick question. So it seems, I don't know, I would support, come back with everything if, with all the samples. I mean, we have invested quite a bit of time into this. I think it would make a lot of sense just to get it done at one meeting, because it could potentially lead to several more, and I think we've put a lot of time into this. But I think you're almost there. It's just, I would come in with that range of samples, and, even if you had to, maybe come in with some short lead time differing brick too, just in case. That's just me offering up my opinion.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask, will staff be working with the applicant on these material choices between now and whenever the next meeting would be? Yeah, so.
That would be good.
So I think staff has been traditionally very good at winnowing down the choices and ensuring compatibility with the surrounding architecture. And I think that you won't have to bring 6 samples and have
Right.
let's everybody, do a ranked choice voting on the sample. No, that's not really what anyone wants to see.
As a feedback for the Planning Commission, from a planning standpoint, I believe that brick color is a good color for the building, and it goes well with the stone that they already have.
Which one?
The new
The one on
stone
the
that they
left,
proposed, it is fine. The question is now, we will make sure we can work with the applicant to find a siding that provides enough contrast and complement to all of it. But on the surface of it, I think that brick with the stone that they already have should these have been the original colors that were proposed in the building, I would have been okay bringing that project before you. It's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Through the chair, I guess I would make a comment that most of that stone is on probably 80% of the building. Or more than half, anyway.
It's on, you have the percentages. But there is quite a bit on there, yes.
A lot is already on there. So, I mean, I can't see us not approving it, because
Right.
that would mean a big tear down. So the biggest question is, do we want you to move forward with the brick?
Right.
That's tonight's question.
That's the question. But we
Right.
would have to approve both.
And then we do want you to look at the other color to match
For the siding.
with
yes.
those colors. Because that sandstone does not, or the stone does not look like what was originally at all.
Okay. Any other comments from the commission? Director Power, did you have something you wanted to add?
I just would encourage the planning commission to see if there's a consensus and maybe somebody could make a motion based off the consensus and general discussion that you've had tonight. Essentially, if there were a decision to move forward with a approval of one material and not the other, I guess I would ask that you ask the applicant to verify they're comfortable rescinding all of their plan except for the brick, if that's what the direction is. But if the direction is to ask for all materials to be brought back at a later meeting, I would just clarify that as well.
I mean, are we also approving the different elevations as submitted? Or is that the next meeting? We're just basically, is the discussion around whether we want to piecemeal the approval of the palette, in essence, or make the applicant come back and approve the palette all at once?
Mr. Chair, I'd argue against approving the elevation diagrams. One of the reasons being that when you're trying to pick a palette and mixes of color, the areas could change. I mean, they may not, but they could. And I think that then, a simple materials approval, that would apply to the plan that's already been approved for use in areas where brick was called out in the plan that has been approved. And that would be, if the commission felt was appropriate, would be a fairly simple and straightforward motion to make against the original plan. But changing these elevations or changing the composition, I think without seeing the full set of plans, without the full set of landscaping, without seeing the fencing, is probably not.
Specs.
Yeah, without seeing the correct specs written down on a paper is not appropriate, would be my opinion on it. Of course, you're welcome to entertain a motion.
Question relative to that. So the original elevations were approved with a brick band at the base, regardless of whether it was full brick or what we call stick-a brick, whatever you want to call it. And my question would be, what was approved? Did they identify exactly what the make of the brick was, or was it a color tone? Because quite frankly, if we don't have to stick to the exact manufacturer style, then they could just put up the brick based on the original approval. It's kind of what you were saying. So they may not even need approval on this. Would that be true?
I was going under the assumption that the material sample for the brick was called out in the approved plan, that the approved plan had a specific tone and a specific manufacturer for the brick, and it was full-face brick on a brick cell. And this material substitution would be to this new manufacturer and a new type of material.
Okay.
Yes.
Admiral Red Velour.
So we're back to, through the chair, we're back to
May I suggest that?
substituting the Admiral Red Velour for whatever
Yeah,
new
could
color
we-
that is.
I mean, quite frankly, that may be what it boils down to. It's just a color
Sorry.
change on the brick approval today.
Based upon the discussion I've heard, it sounds like the planning commission would like to approve this one step with all of the details with regard to the site plan, the landscaping, the brick, the whole thing, so that they have a complete set. Yes, it's probably going to take you another 2 weeks, but the planning commission, I believe, is not comfortable approving one section and then on the offhand chance that it doesn't turn out the way it was actually supposed to, having you once again go back and take out something. So you're expecting a full revised set of plans that would show the courtyard, that would show the patios, that would show the fence, the landscaping, updated site plan. It would show you the entire composite siding color, brick, and the stone that's already on the building on a sheet. So you can see. The columns updated as already built, if that's what intent to be retained.
And the shed dormers as well.
Location of the shed dormers.
Yeah, locations of them, just make everything, match what you, because you could get yourself in trouble, quite frankly, again. Well, if your drawing doesn't match what
Clarifications
you
of that.
built in the field, then once it gets inspected, you could be required to move it.
Through the,
Well, that's,
Then I didn't let you know that. They could say, hey, you got it in the wrong spot, until you get this revised again. So,
through the chair. I have two comments. One, there is an approved plan that has the original approved brick color and material that could be pursued. The other comment is that there is actually a 5-week lag time to the next regular meeting. Just want to be clear about that. There's not a meeting until December 13th. That's regularly scheduled.
through the chair, I got another question. What is the lead time difference between the two brick?
the red velour, I was told, is, the cherry red is currently available in the quantities needed.
What's
The
the
other
lead
is
time
like-
on the other one?
The other one was at least 4 months out.
4 months?
Commissioners?
I'm tempted, Mr. Chair, to ask what the procedure is for calling a special meeting that's not on the schedule. Should the, guys and commissioners, I don't want to see a 5-week delay on this because of a procedural meeting. I do want to see the whole plan, though. I think it's incumbent upon you to put all of the details correctly in front of us so that we can approve it. That's my hope. But a 5-week lead time, normally we're about a week away from a meeting on average. This time we're not.
But I'd like to add to that, that 5-week delay is not our cause. I mean, this, quite frankly, this job, if it was done right, it should have been done probably 4, 5, 6 months ago. So really, the delay is yours. Not, it shouldn't be upon us to take upon your delay as part of our decision-making. So as far as I'm concerned, 4 weeks is a lot less time to wait for the next meeting than 4 months for your brick delivery. Especially if you can get that right away. So your delay is your own, 4 weeks, for not delivering an entire complete package.
Through the chair, not to stray from the most recent point from Commissioner Grant, but Commissioner Jar's question, we haven't had a special meeting since I've been planning director with the township here, but there is a request process that you can use to,
We have done.
there's an extra fee that's involved, and there's a way to apply for that. We'd gather consensus from the planning commissioners, then post the meeting time and date in advance of the meeting in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. There is a way for that to happen if that were to be applied for.
We have done that before.
So not necessarily a full 5-week if the applicant were to pursue that.
Yeah, what would your best guess of that timeline?
I don't have any idea unless we were to collaborate tonight, but what I'd probably be inclined to do is reach out after tonight's meeting if that's something that the applicant actually applies for, and gather some potential dates and times, and then we'd of course post it publicly in advance of the meeting. So I'd reach out maybe with a doodle poll or email chain, something.
Is that a question? Is that something that they have to request, or is that something that we initiate?
That would be a request that would have to be made by the applicant.
Okay, so can I ask what your baseline thoughts are? Would you be interested in that process rather than waiting the full 5 weeks until the next scheduled?
I guess if that's the only option, right? Yeah, I did, the part of the understanding or the commentary prior where it's a material change. If we go with the material change in the 2 items with the previously approved locations and elevations, that seems to get that ball rolling with the understanding that the full elevations, the courtyard, and the siding issue is still at hand until the next meeting, whenever that would be. So that's what I would look for, at least a material change acceptability from the previously approved elevations.
Mr. Chairman, I almost hate to ask it, but if we're going to do a materials change on a sill and a brick color, we have to consider it in the context of the previously approved plan colors. It's hard for us to do a materials change if we can't see what the previously approved material samples are.
They're here. They're here.
Yeah.
Are they all right there? Mr. Chairman, I'm not in favor of granting the materials change at this time, and if there's no more discussion, I'm certainly open to more, but I would be willing to make a motion at this time to postpone any approvals until the applicant is able to bring us a full set. That is a formal motion if we're not going to make any more discussion.
Is that the consensus of the commission
I'll support it.
to look?
If you allow me to, I'll make.
I feel that that's what our direction was at our last meeting, is we didn't want a piecemeal. I understand the position that they're in and the wanting to continue, because I understand. Once masons leave or a contractor leaves, it becomes very difficult sometimes to get them back on site, especially if they happen to have jobs logged up on them. But again, if we start piecemealing, where does it stop? And that becomes a concern of mine, your time coming in all the time. And seeing plans, bits and pieces coming in and having to make the changes, I would like to see it complete, I believe. That way, we're all on the same page. You're done, you're putting things up, and it's over with. We want that facility to open as soon as possible, obviously. Sitting there through construction isn't doing our community any good at this point, but I believe as far as for cohesiveness, I think we need this as an all-in-one presentation as well. Okay,
Mr. Chair? Oh, I'm sorry.
is there any public comment? Anybody in the public for comments?
Yes, there is, and I apologize to anybody seeing the Zoom view right now, but I'm going to turn the video off just so I can read the comment more clearly. Turn the camera away from the Planning Commission. I do have comments and questions from Mr. Stephen Dark, and there are 3 sets of comments, one pertaining to this project, so I'll focus on that right now. With respect to the Hampton Manor project, there is a question regarding whether anything has been done to address the issue with the monument signs, mentioning that there were supposed to be one at each entrance and exit. The response to this question is that there was an approved set of monument signs in this project. There was a sign permit application made to the Planning and Economic Development Department, reviewed by me as the zoning administrator and our building official as part of the sign permit process. The sign that was installed, while it is not in the same location as what was originally proposed and approved, unfortunately, it does meet the zoning ordinance requirements, and it was administratively approved. So that sign was lawfully permitted. It is an open permit. There is a requirement that the finish on the bottom of the sign matches the material of the building facade, which is something it's an ongoing conversation. But just to answer that point, that was an issue where there was a change administratively approved following site plan approval. So the original monument signs at each entrance are not where the sign is located today, but the sign is, I believe, 8 feet in height and located in the proper setbacks in accordance with the zoning ordinance with the proper base material to meet zoning ordinance standards. So I appreciate the question, and I feel free to reach out with any further questions on that. I do apologize for the oversight on that. I will defer the other comments until the other agenda items on tonight's meeting.
Okay, then, do we have any action then on this item?
Mr. Chairman, in matter case 19037, Hampton Manor Senior Housing Project Site Plan Amendment, I move to postpone the request by the applicant Van Buren Investors Land Holdings LLC for an amendment to the site plan and architectural plans for the proposed senior housing facility called Hampton Manor. This site being located as documented in the agenda item tonight, until such time as the applicant is able to present a complete set of revised plans, including details around the additional courtyards, details to include the fencing type intended, updates to the landscaping plan, a material sample for the siding substitution, and an updated set of elevation diagrams showing the intent with regard to the entryway columns. The applicant is encouraged to pursue an avenue of perhaps calling a special meeting when they're available. The commission would be okay with that. Otherwise, at the next available meeting, I submit for discussion of the motion.
Do we have support on that motion?
Support.
Do we have any discussion on the motion? Anybody with any comments? Then could we have a roll call vote, please?
Hill? Bernie Grant?
Yes.
Bud? Jackson Paul?
Yes.
Jeff Jar?
Yes?
Brian Cullen?
And I'm sorry to postpone, but we want to make sure, we don't want you keep coming back. We want you to move forward.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present before you today and for the dialogue and discussion that we had.
For the record, I thought your original design was really nice.
And I think the changes that are coming along are very nice too. The
Yes.
dormers that are up, you know, they look
It's,
good.
I just,
Yes, please, if you could. Thank you.
okay, moving along. Item number 2. Discussion topic. Conceptual land use by Arbor Farms Development LLC. The applicant, Arbor Farms Development LLC, seeks preliminary review comments on the conceptual land use plan for the construction of 57 residential, multiple family residential detached, single-family residential dwelling units in the second phase of the Hickory Woods residential development. The site contains approximately 13.1 acres of property north of Hickory Woods Phase 1, attached multifamily development on the north side of Tyler Road between Morton Taylor and Haggerty. Presentation first by the applicant. Do we have the applicant here?
And through the chair, if I may just call out, the agenda order is typically going to be staff first, but we probably had the applicant speak first, so if I could just offer
Okay.
some guidance. The applicant, if you could just give a brief overview of your project, and then staff will provide some additional analysis, and you can explain what kind of feedback you hope to obtain tonight.
Right. I don't see anything there for staff. Commissioner, Director Power, there is no place for you to have comment.
Make it a little bit more interesting. So why don't we hear from the applicant, and then during planning commission discussion, if you would not mind.
I
we'll
will
ask
open it up to. Sir.
Priest. I'm an engineer with, working for the applicant, HRS or Arbor Farms, and that's Jeff Katzen, and Bertie Gleiberman is here as well, representing the developer. What they are trying to do here is take an unused portion of a property that was developed some time ago and was never really completed. Actually, I should maybe rephrase that. The development portion was completed, but the buildings were never completed. The buildings were not built out. So there's an area in the rear of this development that's been sitting there for some time, probably neglected, and these gentlemen would come along and they would like to put it to use. What we've come up with was they think there's a better market for a single-family home on this land rather than trying to duplicate the exact product that was built up front. And so we've been working with Director Power on how to fit this square peg into the round hole here. And what we've come up with, we think, is something that minimizes as Ms. Krishnan noted, there are some variances or deviations that we would require In order to make this work, mostly in terms of the ordinances that are in place, given that the roads are already there and the detention system, the ponds are already dug, so we have a limited amount of space between the roads and the property lines in all directions, and between the roads and the ponds and the interior. So what we've done over a couple different rounds of meetings with Director Power was kind of try to minimize that as best we could. And we think we've got them down, at least in terms of the site plan, which is, I guess, my portion of what we're talking about here. I'm not going to speak to the architectural stuff. I will let Jeff do that. I think we got that down to like two things that we need deviations for. And one of them is essentially the front setback. Normally in a single-family development, you would have a road right-of-way, and your front setback would be measured from the road right-of-way. In this case, you have this multifamily development, and while the memorandum notes that there is township seems to think there's a 30-foot easement for the road, I don't have any record of that. I couldn't find any record of that. It's not noted in the master deed that I could find. But if there is that documentation, it would still be a matter of, we would just have to have a shorter front yard setback from that easement line. So that is one thing that we can't get around. We can't put a 60-foot wide road right-of-way on this road and have any room left to build a house. And then the other thing, I believe, was the rear-loaded an alleyway. There's no room left in any direction to add an alleyway to this. A further constraint we're faced with here is complying with Wayne County's stormwater rules. Now, it's my understanding from preliminary discussions with the county that they were okay with us leaving everything as it is, as long as we can demonstrate to them that we're proposing less impervious area than that which it was designed for. So I think adding, if we had room to add alleys in the rear of these homes, that would significantly increase our impervious area and get us into trouble on that front. So the two things I think from the site plan perspective that we definitely need some consideration or deviation or variance are the front setback and/or road right-of-way and the alleyways in the rear. And I think there maybe are some other architectural things that maybe Jeff could speak to. A lot of that I think we could get around and come closer to compliance with as well, just from my perspective. But that's the big picture, I suppose. Thank you for your consideration, and I guess I'll take questions if they pertain to the site plan, and Jeff's here if you want to talk about the buildings.
Director
Through
Power?
the chair, it might be helpful to hear from the applicant a little bit about the proposed building architecture. I have a few sample images here that I can put on the screen that are also in your packet.
My name is Jeff Katzen with Arbor Farms Development, and I appreciate you listening to us tonight and look forward to any comments that you guys have regarding the overall development and any specific aspects of that. So, as Evan said, we are trying to fit a square peg in a round hole here with the constraints that this site has. We do feel that the detached product is going to be a very strong benefit to the community. We are decreasing the density, as it does say in the report here. Some of the things that were brought up in the memorandum regarding the architectural, as far as the brick and the stone requirements, we can adjust those, work with you guys. I'm looking forward to hearing your comments after the previous applicant. I know that there's going to be a lot of things that you guys are going to be interested in seeing and commenting on. So we are open to those recommendations. And as far as the, the garages, in the report, it does talk about, you don't want the prevalence of the garage, it just kind of seems like hitting you in the face when you look at the houses. So we are open to making some adjustments to that as well. But I know there are a couple of things, like Evan said, that we really can't really deviate from, and that is the setback and the rear alley below the garages. So we're happy to field any questions that you guys have.
Okay, Director Power, do you have something as far as the staff before we start into our discussion?
I can summarize from staff standpoint. Would you like to hear, there's one public comment tonight that I'm aware of. Would you like to hear public comment? Sure. Okay. So I just will mention that Mr. Dark, who's attending the meeting remotely tonight, said that, quote, "I really like the concept of completing the subdivision with detached homes. However, with it already being a dense neighborhood, I'd like to see cross-access established to the north." So that is a comment for tonight. I'm not sure if there are any others.
Okay, can I also just interject one item? We have, throughout this whole process, we're buying the property from the HOA. We've been in continuous contact with them. Every revision to the plan after we've gone through with Mr. Power has been brought to them. They're totally in favor of this, this site plan and the development, and they're in full support of it, as well as their attorney.
Okay.
Director Power.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for letting us kind of rearrange the order a little bit. But I do want to just mention, this is something we don't receive this type of action on our agendas very often. There's a little bit of historical perspective that I want to provide of why this is being presented in this way tonight. The Planning Commission might recall that in 2020 and early 2021, there was a set of zoning ordinance text amendments made to allow for detached single-family residential homes in the RM zoning district, the RM multifamily zoning district, kind of allowing a boost in density of units to reflect kind of that higher density that you see in RM multifamily, but still maintaining some of the character of detached housing. And so there was a set of detailed prescriptive zoning ordinance requirements that went with that. And so this is far along as any project that has actually started to propose a development plan under that set of zoning ordinance requirements. And what you see is this concept in your packet is a best attempt to fit that set of standards in with the layout that's on, I'm sorry, I'm going in the wrong direction, so I won't pan the screen anymore, but the layout that's on the site currently, which has existing roads and kind of a tight configuration around that portion of the property. I want to show a couple of pictures too. Perspective. Just to provide some additional context of the existing character of the units that have been built out in the first phase of Hickory Woods. This is the existing layout. You can kind of see the street pattern. The homes are pretty tight to the roads. These are attached to 4- and 6-plex units. And I do want to show you kind of what the project looks like in the rear as well. You have kind of a tight meandering road network, fairly narrow roads, and there are some sharp turns. And so those are the kinds of challenges that I think the applicant has addressed. They're trying to meet with putting a single-family detached concept on the site. That being said, we would look to have the site plan meet the ordinance requirements of section 3.107 of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance as what looks like a site condominium style of land development as well. There are those architectural requirements that apply to units and site condos as well. But this is kind of taking the now vacated second phase of Hickory Woods and putting a concept together for it. So I think one of the reasons the applicant wanted to come here tonight to get some discussion is just to get some preliminary feedback on the items that seem to be pinch points or constraints on the setbacks, and to understand if they're going to want to invest in putting a full plan set together that may involve a request to the BZA. So with that said, I know our planning consultant, principal planner has put together comments in kind of a bullet point format. If Ms. Christian wouldn't mind going through your comments on this concept, we can hear those as well.
Excuse me for 1 minute. My packet is missing my letter while I borrow. Thank you, Commissioners. As Director Power summarized, this is an incomplete multiple family development, and the applicant is attempting to finish off a portion that has remained vacant for a long time. The site is zoned RM, multiple family residential, and was previously approved for attached units. Now, the applicant's desire is to build single-family detached units under a 2020 amendment to the zoning ordinance that the Planning Commission had passed. So detached single-family dwellings are allowed in the RM zoning under certain design standards. If the Planning Commission recollects, you took a lot of time to carve out what is the definition of an edge lot versus an interior lot, because you acknowledge that these are smaller lots and thereby are challenged. You wanted to make sure the quality of buildings that went into these different type of lots meets the design standards. So the proposal is for 57 detached units in an area that previously was approved for 116 attached units. So there is a significant decrease in density, so the applicant can note what percentage density is being decreased. Now, there are minimum lot size requirements for the edge, 7,200 square feet and 60 feet respectively. The ordinance defines edge lots as those that are in the periphery of the parcel and that have direct frontage onto a public street. There is a specific definition, which Director Power, if you could later on read out from the ordinance itself, it defines what quantifies an interior versus an edge lot. The first concept plan, the applicant submitted, some of the lots were not exactly meeting the minimum lot area, and since then the applicant worked on their lot sizes in order to make sure that all of the parcels meet the minimum area. We just want to make sure while they're focusing on area, they also make sure that the lot width is complied with. All of the parcels do comply with the minimum lot coverage that is allowable. Now, interior lots have a side yard setback requirement of 5 feet on one side and a combined of 15 feet. So either it can be 7.5 feet, 7.5, or they can have 5 and 10. Per the concept plan, all of the lots comply, but this needs to be verified because the actual 7.5 is shown only for one lot. We want to make sure it is consistent for all the lots. The side yard setback for edge lots is 10 feet on one side and 20 combined. So per the concept plan, lots 12 through 18 comply. Those are the ones that are classified as edge lots in this proposal. It must be verified since 10 feet is shown only on either side. We want to make sure all of the lots do comply with that. This is the important point that the applicant made. The required front yard setback is 30 feet. And the plan notes the setback to the curb, not to the right-of-way line. Setbacks are always measured from right-of-way line to the front of the building. In this case, the applicant is asking to measure it from the edge of curb, which is not the same thing. So in Hickory Woods, per the township records, the easement width is between 30 and 36 feet. So it appears that none of the lots are going to meet the 30-foot setback requirement when they measure it from the edge of the curb rather than from the edge of the right-of-way or the edge of the easement. This will need a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. The limitation that the applicant has presented is a valid limitation. The existing road network is set. You cannot move the roads or the easements. They are what they are, and the applicant will have to fit the lots in and around them. So they are a little limited in the fact that once they have the required front yard setback from the edge of the easement, the rear yard, and the side yards, the size of the dwelling will become really, really small if they had to compare, which might either not be feasible and in some cases might not meet the minimum dwelling size that we would even require for single-family dwellings. So that is a challenge that the applicant is not something that they're going to be able to adjust and comply with. Per the concept plan, some of the underground utilities are located immediately adjacent to the footprint that is shown. The applicant has noted a minimum, or, I'm sorry, they noted a maximum deck depth. But we have concerns that if your utility line is immediately behind the rear door wall of the dwelling, are you even going to be able to build a deck or a patio? If there is going to be a limitation, those are counted as essential outdoor living spaces. A home typically has a patio or a deck. Some of these lots are not going to be able to have either if you're not going to be allowed to build on top of utilities. The applicant needs to make sure if this will even be allowable by the township engineer or the public utilities director. Now, one of the most important requirements in the RM single-family detached residential dwelling structures was architectural details. Not just architectural details, it also required that all the interior dwellings must provide access to a garage or any other accessory structure from the rear via an alleyway. But it did allow the Planning Commission the flexibility to grant a deviation from the standard based on unique features of the parcel or other design considerations. This is where we face the biggest challenge. If you cannot provide a rear alleyway, the architecture of the building has to be so elevated, which is not what we see in the elevations that were presented before you tonight. If the Planning Commission recollects, you spent over 6 months discussing front-loaded garages, and the fact that you did not want garages to be the first thing or the most prominent feature of a dwelling. You wanted the living space, like the porch or something, to be the first thing seen, and the garages to actually not be the dominant feature. The elevations that were submitted as part of the concept review package, I did not believe any one of them met the architectural standard that the Planning Commission would consider acceptable in order to deviate from not having an alley access to these buildings. Should the alleyway concept not be feasible on the parcel because it's so narrow, the building architecture needs to be something exceptional. While the Planning Commission may concede that, yes, you might have a front entry garage, the elevations we see have, it is a garage with a front door attached on the side. I just recollect the extensive conversations we had with that regard. It's still fresh in my memory. So the first time I saw the concept drawings, I was like, okay, alleyway might not be feasible, but these architectural elevations are never going to meet the cut. So the applicant has acknowledged that they are willing to work on the elevations and propose something that would actually meet the township standards. And as mentioned, if the development is proposed as a site condo, which appears that it will, it is subject to the architectural standards in our zoning ordinance, which are very stringent on the requirement for brick and other materials that can and cannot be used on the facade and the details that need to be included. The area between these lots, there are existing detention ponds. So we want the applicant to clarify if there is going to be any public open space or amenity. Could the area around the detention ponds be developed as an amenity? Could the detention ponds itself be considered as a focal feature and put pathways around it, or maybe a gazebo? Some amenity needs to be provided when you're creating 57 new units, some kind of recreational amenity. So that is something we would like the applicant to focus on. So our recommendation for the applicant to appear before you tonight is to get feedback on the elevations, the request for the front yard setback variance, and the alleyway. We do believe from a planning standpoint, it's a great concept to actually finish off a development that has remained unfinished for so long. The ordinance adopted by the Planning Commission does allow for detached dwellings. That said, the smaller detached dwellings were considered acceptable by the Planning Commission on the understanding that everything else about the development shall be so elevated. That is the aspect of the project on which the applicant needs to significantly focus on. So if the Planning Commission can provide the applicant with feedback so that they can determine the feasibility of the project and coming back before you with a proposal, a formal proposal that you would find acceptable.
Questions, comments? And I assume we have some.
Mr. Chairman, my comment is, well, you know, we really want to make sure we get it right and give them good feedback. I'm sorry if there's a lot of words.
Yes.
I'd be happy to give some feedback. I do think that, I'm not sure why the roads in the pond can't be moved. I think you can move a road in a pond, but I don't think you can do it economically feasibly. So it's a subtle difference, but I understand you really can't move, feasibly, it's not really good to move the road. So I understand the difficulty. And I agree with our consultant, Ms. Krishnan, about, the architectural designs will need to be really nice. I guess elevated is the word, not in height. I hope that the applicant is also, I'm not sure what speaking of elevation, I'm not sure what the maximum elevation of a building is in the RM district, or if it is different for a detached single-family home. But I think, didn't we just have a change to the number of stories and height? Yeah, the height, I'm sorry, the height, I misspoke. But I think you can go up to 2.5 stories now, is that true?
Correct.
So that's something for the applicant to consider, that, on a small lot with a small house, taller may be better in that case. I don't know how tall the buildings in the front part of the development are. I think they're fairly tall, aren't they? I think they are. I'll just as a comment, taller may work for this development. I will make a notice, though. I drove through Hickory Woods today. It was a nice little development, and I'm glad to see that you're considering adding on to the other side of it. I agree with the public comment about the cross-access. I believe on the original plan for Hickory Woods, there was at least a paved emergency road going up to Jeremy Street on the neighboring subdivision in the northeast corner. Yeah, it's in the northeast corner, and that the cross-access question would be one that I would want to have. I'd urge you to consider that. It would, you've got a lot of development going into this. It might be nice to have cross-access going north through the adjacent subdivision up to Ecorse Road. I would have some questions about how the site is being designed, whether it's intended to be a site condominium, a traditionally platted subdivision, or a PRD, because I think they all have different requirements for things like open space. The open space question is very valid. That's a tight, this is a tight design. You're really packing a lot of houses in. It doesn't have the same population density or unit density as multifamily, but it's still a lot of units. And I would think that some open space considerations would need to be made. I also noticed on the plan that the lots as drawn, I understand this is conceptual, but there are overflow parking aprons called out on this plan, and it looks to me like the lots are inclusive of the overflow parking areas, and that I don't think is, you need to take that into consideration. There's no parking anywhere on the streets in Hickory Woods, the southern part, so I'd want to make sure that you've taken into account those overflow parking aprons. They already exist. They're part of the existing road network in there. Finally, the Hickory Woods developments, those are all single-car garages throughout the development. So there are no double-wide garages that I saw when I drove through Hickory Woods this afternoon. And the architectural diagrams shown or presented tonight all, as the consultant pointed out, there's a lot of garage. And with a lot of garage comes a lot of concrete. With a lot of concrete means not a lot of grass. And that could have a detrimental look or a detrimental effect on the appearance of the overall development. If the garages were single-wide, a single garage, I understand that from an economic development standpoint, that may not be as desirable as a double-wide, a two-car garage, but it could also open you up to a more interesting and appealing architectural or exceptionally elevated architectural design that's consistent with the development that you're connecting to the south. Yeah, I hope those comments help you. I will also say, with regard to the variance, I always urge people to try very hard to find a way to not go in front of the BZA for a variance. You have to demonstrate hardship or a uniqueness to the property, and it's, you know, I would recommend, since you're seeking comments, you try to find a way to not have a variance required on 57 lots. But that's, I think it's really good that you guys are coming in and considering building out this area. Yeah, and I really like the south part of Hickory Woods, and hope that whatever you come up with is compatible with the existing designs, and good luck on coming up with a more detailed plan. I really am done.
Are you sure?
I really am.
Yeah, okay.
Just offer up maybe a couple of comments. I would agree that based on what I see here, the garages are the big eyeballs on the elevation. They are very prominent. I think it, like what was mentioned, that if you could elevate the design such that it was downplayed and, you know, accentuate the entry, not the garage. And it looks like just the opposite. It looks like the garage is more prominent than the entry, as it's secondary to the front of the facade. So that's probably the biggest thing you have to work on. Other than, I know this, is this underground electrical already in place? It looks like it's identified as it is, okay. I think I have a big challenge building some of these next to that. I don't know if there's a code requirement for distance of,
I don't want to speak out of turn, so I hope this is okay, but
Yeah.
I think we acknowledge, just as a team here, there are a number of utility relocations that would have to take place to make a lot of this feasible. And a lot of that definitely includes the electrical and everything, where for whatever reason they pulled them really far off the property lines, and therefore they do impede, you know, like has been said, the ability to put like a deck off the back of a lot of these lots. I think what we would do would be pursue pushing those things further away, so that there was that, you know, usable yard space or space to put a deck or a patio. And there are even a couple of these lots. I don't see one on the screen right now, but where we would have to move a storm sewer, because it goes right through the middle of, I think, I want to say it's lot 14, if you pan down a little bit. You can see it's kind of light, but there's a storm sewer that goes right through the middle of that one. And so, yeah, there are some utility relocations that would have to be contemplated. And, you know, like I think somebody else said, we wanted to come here and kind of take the temperature of the planning commission to see if all that detailing out was worth pursuing, or if this was just too far outside of the box to spend the time on. So there are a lot of detailed things like that we acknowledge we would want to do to make it a marketable development.
I mean, the only two items I see right now is, from a cost standpoint, is relocation of the utilities that are already in place, right? And the other thing is the variance for the setback. Is that right, I'm hearing? So that's probably the one thing that you want to probably get a hold of right away, to make sure that, you know, you're pretty sure you can get that before you go too far with your engineering, of course.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I think you can solve engineering issues if you can get the variance. The only thing I would add on that is, and even taking a look at what's already been developed, I mean, there is no recreation space or any public space, you know, that can be utilized, and I'm not going to tell you where to put it, but it would be nice if, you know, maybe in that center area somehow there was some connectivity back and forth, east-west, across that pond. But then again, everything depends on what is your, you know, everything cost, you know, has a price. But it would be nice if you could connect the two sides and create an open space for people, for kids. And I guess one last question. These ponds, is there any requirement, and I don't know when this was approved, as far as steepness of the slopes of these ponds, and any safety issues related to any of these houses that back up to it? Is it going to be required to be fenced in any way? I don't know what there's slope issues and fencing requirements for safety reasons. So you may want to take a look at that. I don't know if you have.
Mr. Chairman, the existing development does have those steep ponds, and there's no fencing, but I think that was approved in 1999. And I am not sure what has changed since then, but I believe it may have, and that's a very good point.
We just recently had, I think it was adjacent to this, where they had ponds at least close to the road, where people
Brookwood.
could be close, and they're very close here. So, and there's, you know, if you have kids especially, So I don't know what to make of
Wayne
the
County
pond.
standards are different now. The pond slope is strictly controlled. It has to be a very gradual slope. Should it be steeper, it has to be terraced. You need to have like a fall, and then there has to be a flat surface so that in case somebody falls, you're not rolling straight into that.
Right, so,
And if that's still a concern, it has to be fenced. There are stuff that our engineer will definitely look at.
yeah, so you have to look at that. That might impact what you're doing a little bit.
Through the chair as well, just on that point, the feedback we often get from the township engineer and the county is if there's not an increase in impervious surface, rooftops, paved surfaces, there typically will not be a need to have a new stormwater design, so there may be an ability to use essentially the bones of this stormwater infrastructure. However, the safety standards in our zoning ordinance pertaining to fencing would still come into play with the new site plan, so we'll just clarify that.
Now, I have a question concerning that impervious surface. With the reduced number of construction that's here, we're reducing the amount of impervious surface, correct?
I'm not sure if we know
Not
right now.
necessarily. We have driveways. We have 57 new driveways, which would be, we'll have to actually see the numbers to see. I don't think just because they are going from 116 to 57, they're necessarily reducing the impervious
It's about
surface.
square footage of units compared to square footage of the housing footprint.
Correct.
So I don't know what the original was.
Yeah.
It may have been less than, if you start add up 4 or 5 of these.
You would have four or six driveways to those condos. What I'm wondering is the amount of runoff that you're preparing these ponds for going to stay the same, or is it going to be decreased, where maybe they could either make the pond smaller, that would give more room for the amenities of park or something of that nature?
That's a good point. It may offset some of that if you do provide the.
And that
public
was a
space.
concern I'd had. Are those ponds in place right now?
They are.
Yeah, the ponds are there right now, and, we do have the original design plans that enumerate and quantify how much impervious area these ponds were designed for and the whole system was designed for. And we have to stick with that. Because not just for the ponds, I mean, if we were to start, if we significantly increase the impervious area, we would have to reevaluate the collection system as well. So we really are kind of constrained in we're going to have to make it match or be less than the,
Well, I
what it
was hoping
designed
that
for.
maybe you could be reducing the amount of impervious surface that you would have.
They may not have gone through the calculations yet, right?
Very vaguely I did, and I think we're pretty close. If we were to decrease the, I'll just say this, if we were going to decrease the impervious area here, I wouldn't recommend trying to decrease these ponds anyway, just as an engineer, because, the standards they were designed for are not the same as the standards you designed for today. So, even if we decrease the impervious area, that may get us out of making improvements per the county, but it still doesn't mean it's maybe a good idea.
I don't think you'd gain that much perimeter of it anyway.
No, it probably wouldn't be a very good idea anyway, so. I would recommend leaving, we're gonna be at or below the impervious area, or we're gonna have to trim it back until we are, because getting into this stormwater management system and trying to upgrade it from a 1999 standard, which predates any Wayne County stormwater ordinance, and getting it up to speed of the 2023 Wayne County stormwater ordinance would be pretty impactful to the layout, so.
Considering any public space, just, I know it was made a comment.
We can look at trying to figure out how to put something like that in here without, yeah, I think so. I think there's an opportunity to do some. There are some areas, if you look over like, right here, between lots 57 and 32, there is the edge of another one of those, I don't want to call it a cul-de-sac, but whatever that road feature is. So, that's an area we could use, or we could maybe rotate 57 and 56 and move 52 and 53 over there, and then that would open that space up, which might give us an opportunity to to, like I think Mr. Grant suggested, maybe get across that middle from east to west and, without impacting our desired density here,
Based
so.
on this aerial image, it looks like there is I'm not, dry ground between them, but I don't know if it fills up when it
I believe
rains.
it's an isthmus.
Yeah. How risky.
Much.
Yeah. That's it, I'm good.
What are your designs for the price of these homes to be?
We're not sure yet. We're not that far into the whole market study, but depends on construction costs at the time too.
Obviously.
They're not going down.
Yeah, no.
The only,
It'll be more than condos.
Okay.
I guess the only other thing I would reiterate, as I already said it, I think, is that the design standards are high for us to waive the back, the alley and the garage thing are really the big ones, and it's really gonna depend on the designs you bring. It's really gotta look, gotta have some justification for waiving that standard in the RM district. But I'm not saying it's not doable. I think it's cool that you guys are, approaching this project, so I'm looking forward to it.
Push the garage back, the entry forward.
Yeah, that's, the garage issue is something as was mentioned, we spent a good 6 months battling over. We don't want to see, in a home, we don't feel that the main feature of the home is the garage. And when you pull into some of these developments, that's the first thing you see. And that's all you see across the front. So we've battled hard to try to reduce what that garage is appearing to be as you drive through a subdivision or development, I guess.
So assuming that they are the two-car garages, that, what are some of the things that you would recommend that we use to kind of lessen that impact of the hitting things?
Mr. Chairman, our staff, when you consult with them, they are very well versed on the intricacies of what our new garage standard looks like. I'd urge you to talk to them about what those details are, and to read the new ordinance or the recently updated ordinance that describes what you can and can't do. I think it's pretty clear, and they are, I'm sure, willing to help you in that process, rather than do it in the meeting here.
Through the chair, I guess I would appreciate the fact that none of them are sticking full length in the front yard. So they're only just a little bit further out than the front of the house, and we appreciate that also. And I think what, like Vidya said, maybe a bigger porch instead of the smaller, take it across, make the porch bigger, put a little bit of railing out there so that you might see the garage door, but you're also gonna appreciate the fact that there's a porch there. And maybe some more brick. The brick line is awfully low on those houses, and I think bringing that up would help. And I like the idea of the shutters on the windows and those kinds of things. But I think there's a way of making them look more pleasing. I think I like this look rather than more of the attached condos. And I think people are looking for that, and there's a lot of folks that are looking for this size home. So, I think it's worth looking at.
And I think the garage door makes a difference too on what you choose, as far as it looking like a wall versus something with windows in it.
Something to break that front up, seeing that all metal stuck in the front, I think, kind of is less appetizing, less appealing.
Is your preference also for, what percentage of brick versus stone do you have like to see?
Well, I can speak to that, Ms. Christian, but there are prescriptive guidelines in the zoning ordinance, in the site condo section of the zoning ordinance, and with respect, as Commissioner Jar said, to deviating from side entry garages, there are specific options in the zoning ordinance. So I can share those with you after the meeting.
The specific location in the ordinance, you mean, right? So they can read it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anything else? Any other questions for us? Have we answered and given you some directions to work with? We really appreciate you coming forward and getting that information from us, rather than coming here with a preliminary site plan and getting torn apart. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you.
Moving ahead, item number 3. Administrative update. 49345 South Interstate 94 Service Drive remodel. The applicants, Eric and Corey Nemeth of 1111 Ventures, have applied seeking administrative review of the redevelopment of the former Diamondback Saloon site. Staff will provide an update regarding the status of this review. The roughly 4.9 acre site is located at 49345 South Interstate 94 Service Drive, parcel ID number 830789900030003. The site is Zone C1, General Business District. Director Power.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As mentioned, this is an administratively reviewed project. Generally speaking, it's a reoccupancy of a building with a like-for-like use and little change to the exterior character of the site, and therefore it is the type of project that is reviewed administratively. I periodically give updates on developments or remodels that meet that definition in the zoning ordinance. With this building remodel being nearly complete and it being a fairly prominent site in the landscape of the township, I want to just be able to give an update on what work has transpired there and what the building will be moving forward. And the chair mentioned the location of the site and the basic zoning information. So it's a roughly 5 acre site. The proposed use constitutes a reoccupancy of the building, which requires no variance from the zoning ordinance standards, and a use that is conducted entirely within the completely enclosed building, which does not create additional parking demands beyond 10% of that which exists, and does not substantially alter the character of the site, and therefore it is administratively reviewed. So previously, the building was a multi-use facility with a main floor that contained about 8,000 square feet on the main level that contained food service and bar areas, seating areas, and a pool room, along with a roughly 1,400 square foot dance floor and some storage space additionally. There's also a lower level that has in the past at some point been used for racquetball courts when it was originally designed, and a 1,739 square foot outdoor pavilion. The proposed use of the building will maintain the dance floor area. It will also have a new DJ booth and again, a bar and food service area and seating along with the use of the outdoor pavilion. There's a use statement that's provided with the now conditionally approved site plan, and the use statement is that this group intends to use the site as previously used, while providing a more upscale environment for our patrons. The general use will be for entertainment-based live bands, shows, corporate gatherings, and general bar and restaurant use. They estimate having upwards of 5 to 8 what they call high-traffic events per month, and they intend to work closely with the township and fire and police offices to ensure the utmost positive experience for the community. The site will now be called the Diamondback Music Hall, so it is maintaining that Diamondback name. There are some voluntary, and just to summarize, there I'm sure will be a website for the updated Diamondback if there's not already, but the applicant has other properties in the area where there are events and gatherings. Just more as a point of just reiterating what our general and zoning ordinances already require. The applicant has committed to keeping regulated uses off of the site, prohibiting marijuana consumption and marijuana establishments on the site, complying with the township's noise ordinance, and per the Van Buren Township Fire Marshal, will not be using pyrotechnics, which is something that this company has at some other venues. The applicant has met the basic requirements of an administrative site plan. They've provided a plan with a title and date, a north arrow and scale, dimensions of the lot and adjacent property lines, and the use description that I just summarized. The site contains 253 off-site parking spaces, off-street parking spaces, and there's actually an update to the calculation and the analysis of the parking from what was included by reference in your packet. Their dance floor area is expected to generate a demand for roughly 64 to 92 parking spaces. The bar and seating areas and food service areas, about 132 spaces. And then they estimate having about 25 employees at the peak shift. So the total parking demand is going to be that roughly 221 to 249 spaces on site. And it is going to be a relatively high traffic site as it was, I understand, in its heyday as the former Diamondback Saloon. So I do, in my final report on this project, require that if the applicant were to look at any off-site parking agreements, those would have to be subject to review and approval by the township. Additionally, they may find themselves in a position to seek a future expansion for parking, especially if they start utilizing the lower portion of the building, which they currently are not proposing to do. So if they do expand the parking in the future, future expansions of off-street parking areas on or adjacent to this site will require your review as the Planning Commission. I did mention that the applicant has strongly recommended to build sidewalks across the property's frontage on the south I-94 service drive and on Denton Road. However, section 9.107 of the zoning ordinance stops short of requiring sidewalks for administratively reviewed projects. It only requires new sidewalks for projects that undergo formal site plan review by the Planning Commission. So sidewalks are technically exempt at this time, but strongly encouraged, especially if there's anticipated to be any foot traffic from, for example, the Waverly Apartments next door or any other nearby spaces. Strongly encourage sidewalks. In the future, if any change to the use or building which requires site plan review, I'm sorry, I mentioned that. The sidewalk is going to be part of that. There is some additional landscaping that has been proposed for this site. There are some constraints along the site's frontage adjacent to the South Service Drive. However, the applicant has already installed some new landscaping in front of the building itself and is required to complete the installation of 24 evergreen shrubs and 8 ornamental or shade trees according to their most recent landscaping plan. Their plan as submitted later on September 6th is sufficient and consistent with that submittal. And so one of the things that is being done right now is that there's a bond held for some of the final landscaping to be installed. The site does have, I'll just mention, the site has a unique benefit as a business. It has a large mural on the front of the building that is essentially signage, but it has historically been used that way. Would not meet the current sign ordinance if proposed on a new building, but because of the historical usage of that facade as a sign, it is repainted as a new sign. But otherwise, the applicant has clarified where the existing signs are on site. And the same would be true of the pole sign that's on site. That's an existing non-conforming sign. There are some general comments about the materials on the site, the non-residential uses within the building that I have in the report. But broadly, I have offered on the zoning side conditional approval of this plan. The fire marshal, the police department, and our building official have also been very closely monitoring this site throughout the construction process. The plans were reviewed and many inspections were performed by our department and the other departments mentioned. There's a new fire suppression system in the building and a lot of safety upgrades, including new egress doors and routes within the building to upgrade the safety. So there are a lot of improvements in the building. I will say just seeing the inside for the first time fully finished and never having been in the former Diamondback Saloon myself, but knowing what it was like or hearing about what it is like, it is a vastly different type of operation, but it is going to be a very upgraded site in terms of safety and overall improvements. So happy to answer any questions about that project.
Commissioners, do we have any comments or questions? How soon do they plan on getting a C of O to?
They have I believe it's actually a C of O with a bond issued for the landscaping as of today. I believe they received that because they're having a soft opening for, just a soft opening event. Their company is named 1111 Properties, and they have a description of that on their website in their history description, but that date is significant to them, and they got everything organized so they could get their C of O prior to that event. So they're actually having a soft opening, and then we'll start, I guess, scheduling events.
Yes, that's what I would assume, is they're trying for Saturday.
Yeah.
What, how many days are they planned to be open after, or once they go through their grand opening?
My understanding is that it's not proposed to be as much of a kind of ongoing bar type of space, and while they may try to recreate some of the past scheduled features that were at the Diamondback Saloon, they're going to have more pre-registered events, wedding parties and concerts and comedians and things like that. So they estimated 5 to 8 events of that nature per month, which is a pretty good.
Well, I saw that as high. I didn't know if they were looking at being a restaurant, if they were looking to be open on a regular basis or
Yeah,
just for their events.
Looks like they only make pizza.
No, I don't think there are regular hours that are scheduled as much. And I can report back if I find out if there are any regular hours, but they will have a full pizza oven and kitchen as part of their use.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, do we have any discussion or general discussion and updates? Do we have any other updates or anything you bring forth? Director
Just,
Power?
I will mention that I am still working on scheduling a potential joint meeting with our neighboring communities, and that's going to be an ongoing process. I'm putting some feelers out for some dates and times, but for our purposes, we still plan to meet on December 13th, if not sooner, for a special meeting, so stay tuned.
Anybody else? Questions or comments?
Oh, I
For
guess I
general?
should say happy Thanksgiving, too, if we don't meet before that.
Wish our community a happy Thanksgiving and hope they have an enjoyable time with friends and family. Anybody else, anything? I guess we're ready to hear those infamous words. Are we ready for adjournment?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Support.
Adjourn and a support. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.